Okay, you guys can still see the screen and everything, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you everybody that has joined in. And especially thank you to the panelists, first of all. Thank you to the people that have registered from other universities like Ole Miss and North Dakota. We're really excited to have you guys here. And also a lot of people from industry have joined the list as well. So kind of hoping that maybe there are some things that our industry personnel can take back to hiring processes at their own companies, and things that students can take from our panelists to move forward in their job searches. So today, navigating the energy workforce as an international student, tips and skills for landing the job. I'll save the introduction of the speakers for Chesney, but this talk is co-hosted by the AAPG Wildcatters and SEG. We're very thankful to our sponsors of the Diversity and Inclusion Lecture Series, Aramco Americas. So they sponsor anything that we do in person. They also provide coverage if any of the students are interested in seminars that are outside of U of H that are focused on D&I topics. We'll pay for you to go to those. So let's see, a couple of announcements before we get started. So this one applies to UH students. There's the AAPG SEG image lottery that we run, and image used to be called ACE, but it is the big annual convention through AAPG, this time around paired up with SEG. And if you've never been before, it's like every kind of topic, every kind of seminar, any kind of workshop, all these different companies. It's definitely the one place, if you would like to work in industry, you need to be at this conference. There are also a lot of opportunities to see posters from students and things like that. So what we want to do is send as many students as we can to the Image Conference this upcoming year. It's in Houston. We're already saving a bunch of money on travel costs. So we want to send the students to Image, and all you have to do is attend any kind of AAPG, SEG, or Geo Society talk at U of H, and you get a free lottery ticket for the drawing at the end of the semester. One other thing that you can get out of this Image lottery is the short course funding. So I speak from a geochemistry perspective. I've taken these geochemical short courses at ACE or at Image, and the amount of information you're learning in such a short amount of time from absolute industry experts, it's incomparable. So also the costs of these short courses are not usually the cheapest. So we do have a fund to cover that cost for students. What you would have to do is just send an email down here to aapg.wildcatters with some of the information about the short course that you're wanting to attend. One more announcement, if you want to get more involved in these student chapters in general, AAPG and SEG, we're both holding officer elections right now. So if you'd like to put your name forward for one of those positions, reach out to any of the officers and we can add your name to the voting list. So last, we're here at the D&I series, and this was started this semester in January with the goal of introducing our students to a more diverse set of industry professionals and mentors so that they can build up their own networks of contacts to keep in the future. So we introduce our students to these mentors by inviting them to give technical talks like this, focused on the job search, focused on networking, building a brand. And so what we're hoping to all of the students that are here is that if you feel that you're relating to what the panelists or the speakers are saying, reach out to them, build a connection, network with them, use them as a resource. So also, if you have any suggestions for people that you would like to bring in as a D&I speaker in the future, please let us know. We also have a Google form that is going to go out at the end of next week, and it helps us kind of organize and prioritize our talks for the fall 2022 semester. So I'm going to send this out next week. If you complete this survey, we will also give you an extra lottery ticket for the AAPG SEG Image Conference. So, oh my gosh, I think I kept it to 5 minutes. I will turn it over now to Chesney to introduce our speakers.
Thanks. Okay, so everyone's probably seen this flyer already, and now you can see them in person on the screen, kind of. But we've got Sandeep up first. Sandeep Mukherjee, he's currently a geological advisor on the Callan subsurface team. He's a petrophysicist extraordinaire, and he's been with Schlumberger and Halliburton, has over 15 years of industry experience, probably much more than that, to be honest. And he is someone that is gone through just about the complete visa to U.S. citizenship process. And then we've got Veronica Gonzalez. She's an engineer, lots of completions engineer, modeling. Right now, she's production engineering manager, also at Callan Petroleum. And before this, she was with Schlumberger as well and led a really international team where she was responsible for a lot of their sponsorship paperwork. So she's really familiar with that side of things. And then we have João Silva. He's a Portuguese native. He attended University of Virginia, and he's now a senior financial analyst at EDP Renewables, and he does portfolio management for wind farms. So we even have a renewable guy in here today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sandeep. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniela. First of all, thank you for inviting me over. Very glad to be here, very honored. That was a very generous introduction, Chesney, more generous than I deserve. So I'll try to do justice to the forum. Let me share my screen. Again, with the day and age we are in, we cannot do anything with the PowerPoint. So here it goes. This PowerPoint is basically, just a discussion starter. That's kind of how I would use it. As Chesney said, let me try to. Hold on. Nope, it's not how I want it.
I think you go to display settings and then you switch your. There we go.
There you go. Okay, so in this, as Chesney mentioned, I was not born in this country. I'm an Indian national, and I'm going to try to kind of tell you my story, and hopefully we can start a discussion on this whole process, right? So 4 steps, right? Really, if you consider very big, broad picture, from when you come to this country being a student, and then when you kind of gain your U.S. citizenship. I'm not the whole path yet. I've not traveled the whole path. I'm kind of somewhere right here, right? So I can probably tell you what my story is. So really 4 sections, being a student, maintaining your academic status, campus employment, those kind of things, we covered that. Starting your first job, going through the CPT and the OPT process. Not sure if you all know that. We can, check questions afterwards. And then finally the H-1B visa that gets you a work permit to work here. And then once you have it, we kind of talk about the permanent residency process, how to get a green card, when to start the process, so on and so forth. And then finally, after that, a lot of you might consider getting a U.S. citizenship. We'll talk about that as well. So, being a student, right? When you first come to this country, I think most of us, at least I was, extremely happy because that's something I wanted to do for a long time, and coming here was a sense of achievement, But that is wrong. You shouldn't have a sense of achievement coming to this country. It's one box checked in a big long list of things that you are trying to accomplish in your life. So I'm going to start at the very basic level. Most of the international students, they have something called an I-20, right? So once you come to this country, make sure I-20 is current, meaning, one of the very important resources here is your international student card. You arrive, go in there, make sure they have it the way you have it, and everything looks correct. Any kind of changes you make, right? So if you're an engineering student, you come with electrical engineering and switch to computer science, that requires change of I-20. If you come for a master's program, change to PhD or vice versa, that needs a change of your I-20. So make sure all those things are correct. That helps you give your academic status. I'll tell you why that is important. 3.0 GPA for every international student. I think it's still a requirement. Might have gone up a little bit, maybe 3.2, not sure. Again, every university have a different criteria. So talk to your academic advisor, how that thing is. And also, there's things like academic credit, research credit, those things. Talk to your folks about that. Make sure you're on top of these things. Because when you go for employment, to be gainfully employed, these things will be checked, right? So if when you are here, there are a couple of types of employment that you can get. One is a campus employment. You're allowed to work on your campus. I believe that's still 20 hours a week, half time. You can work wherever you want. You can work in your department as a TA or an RA or a lab assistant. You can work in the cafeteria. There are various forms of employment. Make sure your school approves the type of employment you're taking. This is going to be important again. What I'm trying to say is you have to maintain that academic status, because that's one of the very first checkpoints, for you to graduate, for you to ask for off-campus employment authorizations, right? So any off-campus work that needs specific authorization from International Student Office, your advisor, and the United States Immigration Services. And then make sure your advisor is okay with it. There are horror stories about you working outside or people working outside, and the advisor finds out, and that doesn't. There are times when it didn't go very well. So after your first year or the first 2 semesters, you are allowed to get an internship. You can apply for a job. As you know, internships are generally over the summer. You can apply for what you call a curriculum practical training, or a CPT employment authorization. International Student Office will know this, right? So if you want to work the summer after you have arrived, start the process early. Start going to their offices in early spring of that year and start bugging them, because it takes time. And currently, the USCIS, they send you an EAD card, employment authorization card, and they are heavily backlogged. So you have to go to them, start that process. That process needs some paperwork, to be filled out and stuff like that. That paperwork needs your advisor's signature. So make sure your advisor know your plans ahead of time, right? Ahead of times. So this is something also, being a student, you have to be aligned with what your advisor wants you to do and what you want to do. And sometimes those sync, great. Sometimes they won't sync. So it's very important you have, periodic meetings with your advisor, sit down and say, this is kind of what I want, what do you think? Remember, there's a lot of places your advisor will need to approve with a signature, right? So if he doesn't sign, you're out of luck. So make sure, he understands what you're trying to do. If you ask, a lot of the advisors would rather have their student work in campus as an RA during the summer so that they can advance the research. If you have other plans, make sure he's okay and how you're going to make up for it. Discuss all those. So if you're working an internship, use your CPT or curriculum practical training, not your OPT. Can be done both ways. OPT is something you should preserve after you graduate and when you start one. Right. So then again, start those things early, graduate in time, right? And come here, sometimes you change your majors, and that's okay to do. You change your, you change your direction. You come here for a master's, go for a PhD, or the other way. Do it early. The first year, this is again from my very hard experience. Your first year, don't waste time after that. Make your decisions in your first year. Again, nothing set in stone, just a recommendation from somebody who has gone through this. So, starting your first job, right? Stephanie mentioned, a lot of you had questions in how you get that first job, because with international students, there is always a question about, hey, your employer telling we don't sponsor visas. That's a very standard question. the very standard answer to the question of, can I get an employment with you? So there is a conversation that needs to be made, right? So after your graduation, when you start the job, you can start it in what you call an extended internship. You can use your CPT for that. There is a limit for how much time you can use on the CPT. So let's say if you have used every summer, for 3 years, so that's 3 months times 3, 9 months, you still have 3 months left on the CPT. I think you get the CPT for a total of 12 or 14 months. Make sure you check that with the international office, what they say about it. Avoid using any kinds of OPT for internship unless you're completely done with your coursework and you're about to graduate and your OPT has not arrived yet. Right. So, keep your enrollment as a full-time student. That's something you have to do for CPT and OPT. Again, OPT, you can sign up for research credits when you're done and make sure your advisor is okay with that. Once you graduate, once you actually defend and submit those forms in for graduation, take the walk, whatever, you cannot use CPT. You have to use OPT. Now there is also the time and how much time you can use on your OPT, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But my recommendation for internship would be always using your CPT unless you're running out on your CPT time, right? After you've done that, next is, starting to work full time. You have to get your OPT application going really early. If you're graduating in fall, a lot of us, do that. Start that early summer. You can put a tentative date, right? You can put, if you're not sure if you want to graduate that fall, I would say set it out. When you're absolutely sure your advisor is okay. Generally, what happens is you defend your thesis and then you start writing your thesis, and that takes a solid 3 months, unless your advisor is absolutely okay with your thesis, before you go and defend it. So if those take time, make sure you kind of account for those. OPT applications can done, 3 months before and 2 months after the graduation. So if you apply 2 months after your graduation, then you cannot work for those 2 months, right? There used to be a case where that application, that receipt of application was good enough for you to start for it. I'm not sure. My information is a bit dated, so please check that. That used to be the case. I'm not sure how it works for now. So the OPT starts off with 12 months. So you get 1 year before, they have to convert your H-1B, which is the work permit for any U.S. non-nationals, right? And as you know, H-1B is kind of a timely thing. You have to apply to start using your H-1B in September. You have to start apply in March, right? So that's pretty much a very long time. And if there are more applicants than there are spots, there is a lottery. And it has happened, and I know cases where an applicant did not get H-1B because there were more applicants and he did not get picked in the lottery. So for that, the government has started what they call a STEM extension. So STEM is any kind of science, medical, technology, engineering, that related projects, related degrees. So those OPTs are available for 24 months. So you get 2 chances to be picked in the lottery. And most of the time, most everybody, gets lucky in the second chance, if not in the first, because that's how it works. So if you don't get, you tell your employer that you can use your OPT for a little bit longer, and then start that process early. So again, Chesney mentioned something, and a lot of these jobs and internships. How do you get one, right? Because you've seen when people come to campus interviews or people come to job fairs, they first ask, are you allowed to work in the U.S.? And then if you say, well, I have to get a CPT before, they get discouraged, because a lot of the recruiters who come on campus, a lot of them do not have the full knowledge of these things, right? So what do you answer? Your answer, again, would be truthful, and you said, yes, I have an EAD, or I'm getting an EAD. That's what your answer should be. which is an employment authorization document. And that is true because they don't have to do anything for that. You have to apply and you're going to get it. I have seen about 200 students, my peers, my friends. I have not seen one who got a CPT or OPT application turned down unless, they had a form missing or a document missing. Okay, so that's the answer. Now, how do you meet recruiters? That was another question, right? So I'll tell you my story. I went to University of Minnesota, and I started geology there. So most everybody who went to University of Minnesota and started geology had a research topic that was more of a classical geology. So mine was geochemistry, and I took a piece of meteorite and then melted it at high temperature and pressure. You're trying to figure out what the primary nebula was like, how the first rocks were formed and all those kind of stuff. It had nothing to do with oil and gas, right? So again, nobody came to recruit in Minnesota ever, at least in our department. But I needed a job when I was trying to graduate, right? So kind of looked in and saw Schlumberger was coming to recruit from the engineering department. They showed up in the engineering department one morning and said, hey, you have this interviewers coming in, the recruiters from Schlumberger. Can I meet with them? And they said, sorry, no, can't. Only engineering students are allowed. So I came back that day, thought hard about it, went the next day again and say, I really need to, talk to somebody. I understand, if it's for you only, but would be very nice, So took a little bit of kind of talking, and they finally agreed. He said, okay, you can come in for an interview. I'm pretty sure they thought that they're only coming to recruit engineers and not geologists, so I didn't stand a chance. So during the time of the interview again, went through the interview process. They asked questions, mostly behavioral questions, not much technical ones. And then they asked what I was expecting out of the job, this kind of thing. And they said, we're recruiting engineers. Are you ready to be an engineer? So Schlumberger recruits field engineers from pretty much all disciplines. I said, yeah, I will be. And that's how it all started, right? I didn't end up being a field engineer. And that also happens. You get recruited for one position, and then, the recruiters offer you to the bigger company, and then you can get picked into another group. So I ended up doing geology from the very first day, but that was just happenstance. So again, moral of the story, you have to be flexible. If you're just looking for a job in the broader discipline, you have to be flexible, right? You will know you're going in something, you can get offered something else. You have to be flexible on that, especially if it's an internship, because you will always learn no matter what you do, and that you will always have second chances and third and fourth chances to switch your career in a different direction. But you need that first start. Okay. All right. Next, we'll talk about a little bit of permanent residency. So your H-1B now, let's say you started working, that H-1B is valid for 6 years. And after that, you're done. You cannot work in this country anymore with an H-1B. If you don't have another petition or a visa, you have to leave the country. Your H-1B cannot be moved to a J-1, which is a researcher visa. It has been done, but extremely hard. I would never encourage that. So what are your ways? You have to start working on a green card, and preferably you have already started working on it now. So everybody asks me, when is the right time to start working on the green card? I say the time is now while you are in school. So give yourself a weekend, go to the USCIS website. I have some snippets here from that website, and know the categories where you can apply for, the different categories of green card. There are 3 categories on employment base: the EB1, EB2, and EB3. EB3 is sponsored by employers, but you can self-sponsor yourself on EB2 NIW and EB1A, these 2 categories. And these are the 2 snippets I have in here. So these ones tells you what are the requirements for these, right? So you see a lot of these requirements, you're already doing stuff in school, right? So Evidence of your authorship of scholarly articles. This is something you do at school. You write papers, you write conference abstracts, right? Anything you write, keep a record of that. Any conferences that you were present to, keep a record of that. If you get invited by a society to present a talk, keep a record of that. How do you keep a record of that? Ask the organizers afterwards if they can write you a commendation in their letterhead. Right? So you start building up the evidences way early, and then you are very ahead in the game. I would recommend, knowing what you're going for. This EB1 and EB2, these are the two things I think you should go for. Then it takes out the equation if your employer will be willing to sponsor your green card or not. You can even file these green cards petitions without starting your job. You can file it with a job offer. First job offer, you can file it. Now, the reason I'm telling you to start these early is one, when you're a student, you can look at these things, and some of these you can do in school much easier than you can do when you're started the job, right? Because some companies you would go work for are kind of very to keep things confidential, very protective of their IP. They won't allow you to publish. So the stuff you can do in school, not a whole bunch of those you can do in the industry. Another thing is if you are from two of the countries, that there's a lot of folks around from India and China, not a lot of these green card priority dates are current. If you don't know what a priority date is, please read it up this weekend. If you apply for a green card, that's called a petition. When your petition gets approved, they send you a notice saying, yeah, congratulations, it's approved. You can adjust your status when your priority date is current. There are only so many green cards that are given out, and each country has a quota. Now, India and China being one of the two most populous countries, there's a lot of folks who apply, and the quota runs out pretty fast every year. So even if you get your green card petition approved, you might have to wait a long time for your adjustment of status. My EB2 was approved in December 2014. It is still not current yet. I'm still waiting on that. Right? So I'm telling you from personal experience, the sooner you start, better it is. The EB1 is a more competitive category. All the requirements are a bit more stringent, but I still think you should definitely try. And a lot of these are, very similar. If you look at the criteria, it's very similar. So please do research those. So I finally myself, I'll tell you about 2 years back, 3 years back, I went ahead and applied for an EB1. And again, just applying is not really, the deal. They take a long time to adjudicate those cases. Once the case is adjudicated, you have to still again wait for the category to be current. Fortunately, EB1 is current, but it took, for me, 2 years to approve that petition. So I have an approved EB1 now, but I still don't have a green card because we're waiting in a queue for them to be able to adjust the status and give it to me. I'm hoping in the next 2 years I will have it. Okay, so that's why I'm telling you, start it now while you have the time, on your side. Finally, considering the U.S. citizenship, you can get the U.S. citizenship. There are some countries that participate in the visa lottery or the citizenship lottery. I'm not 100% on that, if how that goes now, but you should definitely look into that as well. But after you have your green card and you have been in the country continuously and lawfully for 5 years, you're allowed to apply for a citizenship, right? And you have to be physically present for 30 months, meaning if you're taking a vacation out to Mexico, you have to discount for that time and those kind of things. If you are, going back to your home country to spend a couple of months with your parents, coming back, you have to discount for that time. So when you have physical presence for 30 months, you can apply for the citizenship. There's a couple of considerations there. There is a nationality rule in a country of birth. Some countries can let you have 2 passports. Some other countries like mine doesn't. So, you forfeit the other passport if you apply for a U.S. Citizenship. And those are some of the things you have to kind of consider. You can remain in a green card forever if you want to be. And I know folks like that who have decided not to get a U.S. citizenship. It's a matter of personal choice. But by law, after that, you fulfill the residence continuum, you can go ahead and get a U.S. citizen. So that's pretty much everything I had. I'm going to unshare my screen, and if you have questions, we can take it, I guess, at the end of the talk.
Hello, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I'm very simple this time. I'll only have one slide. Hang on, let me get this out of the way. Sorry. Oh. Sorry, I don't know what's pulling up on another screen. Hang on just a second. And if you see children, I apologize. I have 2 small kiddos at the house. So, can y'all see this?
Yep, we can see it, not full screen yet though.
Okay, let me see.
I think it's probably fine viewing it just like this if you have issues moving it to full screen.
Okay. Well, it'll be shared today, but I just wanted to, before I start, the thoughts, like everything I'm going to express here is just my personal view. I have no affiliation. None of these are like the company views that I'm going to talk. And I am by far not a lawyer, so please don't hold me to any of the legal little caveats that I kind of inject here. But what I wanted to say from a company standpoint, I used to manage a team, a small technical team that was predominantly all technical visa holders. They all were working on H-1Bs. I had about 13 of them reporting into me. Many of the things that started off whenever we were hiring, so I was part of the hiring process and part of the function that went recruiting for these individuals. And then from there, we moved into, in some of the instances and cases, pushing them towards green card applications. And this was also too when I worked for Schlumberger, predominantly all Schlumberger. What the advice I'm going to give to a lot of you is probably from me being a manager looking for certain candidates, and also kind of the process in which we went from the application process through to their filing of green card applications. So from a hiring perspective, it is valid to go to job fairs and ask if people will sponsor. Those are the opportunities in which you can. So usually when I was at a career fair at a hiring exposition or exhibition, I would actually take resumes, and at that moment, they can ask you if you do sponsor. Most international large companies in the oil and gas realm do this, whether on the E&P side or the service side. They do sponsor, provide sponsorships for visas. That the hard thing, I think, kind of moving to smaller companies or companies that predominantly run out of the United States, it gets a little bit harder in order to make that entryway in and become somebody that can, essentially join and be sponsored. And the reasoning being that even though you guys are students and you're amongst the student population, when you enter the workforce and you're also in the workforce, you're also competing against a lot of American candidates. And whenever you go through this process, the U.S. looks at job and positions that are being held and what they can staff with U.S. citizens first. As fair or unfair, that's just the nature of how everything goes. They look and see exactly who can be sponsored from American workers, and then from there they move on. The hard part too about the energy industry is We don't get priority when it comes to filings or actually getting the number of sponsorships or even green card applications. Your top industry leaders you end up competing against IT and usually medical fields. Those will get the most numbers to actually from the government in order to be able to sponsor. So it's just a hard thing. Everybody's all a huge population seeking one essentially piece of paper that will allow them to stay in the country. So that's hard. When I go looking for moving towards the candidate selection, the resume is the entrance. And I'm going to tell you guys something that I think a lot of managers, whenever I was hiring, look for. We don't ever look for people that just have 4.0s. That is not a driving force whenever employees hire. I know Sandeep had mentioned, having a 3.0 or better. It is crucial to have a high GPA, but it is not a deal breaker. And please don't lose sleep over the GPA that you hold going into looking for something. The interview process becomes more in depth, but I don't think out of any of the people that I hired, any of them held like a 4.0. It was more, you have to have a proper balance of your resume being great, your student and the way that you did things in school, how you exhibit that, and your work ethic. And then once you enter the workforce, you're going to be graded and go through a series of performance appraisals. All of that will actually contribute, like Sandeep said, to getting to the next step past the H-1B process and moving in towards residency. Also, the skill set. You have to become, and most of you probably all know this, you have to have accolades not just within your career, just being a student, or even when you enter the workforce. You have to be visible, not to the company internally, as well as externally to the mass population that is around. That's why things such as the AAPG or SPE or any of these societies actually help you move forward. And that's something that they look for. So start working on that, like Sandeep said, in school. It is easier. It does kind of get a little bit more difficult, especially when you get into the employee status, because like Sandeep said, it's one of those things where your IP, intellectual property, belongs to the company you're with. So it becomes very hard to share a bunch of we're just going to give out a bunch of information to everybody, because then everybody benefits from that without having the burden of the cost, right? So an application, whenever you do this, and even right now, I know that even a student, it's very hard to do this, but you have to start thinking about saving money to start this process. This process, if you're sponsored and it goes through, it will be covered by the company. However, the company does take on a lot of the financial hardship. I gave some advice to some of my engineers in which they did save, and they went to external counsel also to go maybe through another process that would help them. The company too, it's a hard thing to do. Like I said, it's a competitive market and you're substantiating against a bunch of US citizens. So inside companies, it becomes very hard for the company to distinguish what's the differentiation between you and another US citizen that could probably go through this whole process themselves. From a personal standpoint, you have to research. Public websites are good. Knowing where exactly the timeline fits. Knowing if you're going to take that next step and you're going to seek a green card at some point, you have to start that process as soon as possible. And I tell you this because there are instances where it does not go the way that you want. You may file your perm application, you may get through the H-1B, you're ticking on a clock, like you said, 6 years. Usually it takes the first 3 years as an employee to develop a reputation and to develop enough performance appraisals for the company to invest in you and say, hey, we will help you, we will help fund your green card application, or we will take you to the next level, or we'll keep on renewing you for the next 3 years or at any point. It's as hard as it is to say, and I know that there is some people that really desire like an empathetic response there. At the end of the day, it's still a business decision for the company that's involved, because they are investing quite a bit of money for all of the sponsorships that they have. So when I say seek out international company presence, I'd say that not only to have the visa, but to protect yourself in the instance that something happens in the States and you have to exit the country to either reset your visa, or perhaps we have another incident where oil goes negative, or, you know, you will have a place to go in which, even if it's home country, back to home country, so that you can work for a little bit. It resets your clock so that when the times come good again, you can come back to the country and start over. But another one of the big things about, I guess, in the preparation of doing this in your timeline, even though you're going through the EB1, EB2, if you're going to decide to move on to permanent residency, you have to take into consideration that your application may get denied or your application may get audited. In any of these instances, your visa clock keeps running, but the process could possibly start all over again. So like Sandeep said, if you file your perm back in 2014, if you're of certain citizenship, that takes longer to get to than, say, somebody who's from Venezuela. So if an Indian or Chinese nationals have a harder time, and their clock is a lot longer depending on the category in which they file in, than some of the others. So you need to be up to date and figure out, are you current? Is your citizenship going to be current? Or how much time do I have before I have to reset all of these things? And then, like we said, become active in organizations and publish patents and industry use documents in order for that. So that's really all I had. I know that we kind of probably overlapped and went over a little bit of things. I apologize for my daughter. But if you all need help or you want to reach out to me personally, I will feel free. And then if you want to have any other details, just let me know.
Okay, I think it's my turn now. So let me go ahead and, or sorry, Daniela, were you about to say something? Was I too quick?
No, I'm just here if you have any questions, but yeah.
Okay. Okay, then let me go ahead and share my slides. Okay, so I guess I'm going to split this kind of into two sections very quickly. Talk about my experience. Mine has been pretty traditional. I'm going to try to not overlap so much on what has already been explained. So I'm going to do this for a little bit and then talk a little bit about some tips and tricks that worked for me while going through the application process. So I'm João Silva. I was born in Portugal. I moved to the US in 2016, where I did, well, the purpose for this was to go to college, to the University of Virginia. So I was under an F1 visa, and I did my undergraduate studies in finance and data analytics. And I began my job search quite recently, actually, January of 2020. And the sort of job search process took me about 5 months. I'm going to touch on this on the next slide because I would advise against this sort of timeline. I think it's too short, and it definitely was stressful for me. But yeah, luckily it worked out. So I was put under, I did use my OPT for a year. In my case, and I think for y'all's case, for the most part, you guys have the option of extending your OPT for an additional 24 months. Luckily for me, I was able to secure the H-1B visa my first time. Yep. So that's kind of a quick rundown of my experience, and now I'm going to move into the more important part, which is some tips that kind of worked for me and stuff that was shared to me by the ISO, the International Students Office at UVA a couple of years ago. So number one is to start early. Like I said, 5 months is too short. Ideally, you should be thinking about your job a year in advance, and even you should be thinking about your internship. So first, I would say the easiest and most successful path to a full-time offer is to start with an internship, and that's because it's an option for you to be using your CPT, and really the company that's hiring you doesn't have as much financial risk having you there. And this really gives you the opportunity to show what you got, and ultimately a lot of times what happens is they extend that full-time offer. Now moving more into the full-time position, I'm going to share a few things that kind of that I did that didn't really work out. That looking back, I realized how I could have done better. This point here is pick your battles. I would say I spent too much time just going online and filling too many applications where, I sort of saw that my profile lined up with the job description, and quite simply, I applied. For the most part, this has a relatively okay chance of success for an American, but not for internationals. For me, really, what worked was going the route of a position or a job where I really saw that I had an obvious advantage or a connection with the company. In my case, that connection was the fact that I was Portuguese, and they were looking for someone with a financial background who could speak a few languages and potentially worked with investors in French-speaking Canada, which is a language that I speak. So really, it lined up perfectly, and you should be, if possible at all, looking for these kinds of opportunities. The second point here is to use LinkedIn. This was something that worked with me, and I was successful in securing a couple of processes through LinkedIn. And I actually prefer to not apply through the kind of typical platform and ways of applications. I would directly message recruiters and employees. So I'd use the option of, sending a friend request on LinkedIn, and with that you can include a little message. So that's kind of what I did as a sneaky way of getting in their inbox, and that actually worked out better than just a purely standard applications. So in those messages, you should really try to keep it short and ask for a follow-up call and an informational call. I would also be sending a good amount of cold emails, and really one other thing that worked is looking for friends. LinkedIn has this option of obviously seeing where your friends are working and where and whether or not the company that you're looking at has some alumni. So having that direct connection is very, very helpful versus just going in the dark. And thirdly is the kind of standard job search, which I guess for me, this number 3 was really number 1. So I think, in my opinion, this should be your last way of trying to go about the job search, is just the typical Google search, going on websites, and filling standard applications. In my experience, when I did this, my logic was that the more that I applied to, the higher the chances of success. Yes, to some degree that's true, but you know, I'm sure all of you guys are busy and have responsibilities. So, you know, filling 300 applications is not fun. With this, I would tell you to avoid applying to jobs that from the get-go tell you that they will not offer sponsorship. Just as my experience. Obviously, this might work out if you know, if the company simply hasn't offered sponsorships in the past and could potentially be open to an exception in your case, then you know that could happen. But in my experience, odds were very low, and I very rarely heard back from positions that I was really interested in, but you know, advertised, that sort of thing. With these standard applications, obviously this is sort of a more standard advice, is to try to tailor your CV and cover letter to the job descriptions that are in that you're applying to. And the reason for this is because a lot of companies, namely large companies, nowadays run an automated process that just looks for keywords. So it's really not a human looking at your CV. Moving on to the third point is this is, you know, kind of standard, is to really be open to options. The odds are already low enough. In my case, I was looking at positions in the US, but also in my home country of Portugal and also Europe. So this is obviously not an ideal thing, but it's I think crucial to, you know, not be stuck in a position where you're just found unemployed after you graduate. Something else that I did, which honestly is I found a bit hard to do in the beginning, simply because I didn't find as much information available online, is to look for companies that sponsor you. So what I mean by this is kind of have a list of companies that typically submit H-1B petitions and are open to sponsorship. And the way that I went about this, through the help of my the ISO at my college, was but for them to provide me with a record of where their students went. So this was what they provided me with, and I found this very helpful because I could see sort of where I had the most chances of securing a position. And I think this should be something that potentially your ISO could be able to offer. And there's also other websites that I list here, goingglobal.com and My Visa Jobs, that have a series of that sort of fit the job as well, where you'll be able to see which are the companies in the US that have filled the most H-1B petitions in recent years, and you're able to filter out by the position that you want, the employer that you want. So you can sort of play with those websites, and that gives you an idea of where you're most successful or most likely to secure a sponsorship. Now, these options are for historical petitions, so keep in mind this might change. And so a company that would be open to sponsorship last year maybe is not anymore this year. So to sort of balance this out, what I used at the time was handshake.com, which is kind of a LinkedIn. I'm not sure if you guys currently use that platform, but this is what I used while in college. And so the platform, and I actually think this is open to almost all students in the US. It gives you the option to filter out by companies that do offer sponsorship for OPT and CPT. Moving on to the second to last point is to stay organized. This helped me in my case because I wasn't applying to 2 or 3 companies. I was applying to many, many companies. And so I used a spreadsheet to track my my applications. And you're going to see here in the parentheses, C template. I'm actually going to drop the template that I used here in the chat. So you guys feel free to use it. Let's see if I can actually do this. Maybe not. Usually there's an option here to attach, but I only see the option to include a GIF, which is not what I want to do. So maybe I can speak with Daniela to see if I can send this as a follow-up on an email. I'm sure we can figure something out, or I can probably drop this into a Google Sheet and then send you a link.
Yeah, we can definitely figure that out to make sure that everyone gets it.
It's strange. I'm not seeing the attachment, but either. But
Yeah, it's usually here. I can maybe, let's see if I actually have pulled it up here. And this way, I can actually use sort of what I'm talking about, and then I can just send it over to you. And let's see. Yeah, so this is what I used. Something very simple, but very useful. And so there's a series of columns here. I just include the job title, the company, the link that I used, if there was a link, and then the application date, sort of what the status is. Here I remember I had either dead or alive, yeah. So obviously this helps you in a nice, pretty way of in tracking your progress, and then whether or not you had a contact there, when you sent your resume, if you had any references, if you were successful, what dates were the interview, if you followed up in the interview, you should also do that, and then any other comments. So this is kind of a very simple way of kind of keeping track of your applications. Obviously, if you're successful after one try, you don't have to use this, but in my case, it was. And this kind of brings me to my last point. Let me share my screen again, which is kind of a qualitative one, but to keep your head up and not get discouraged. I sent over 40 applications and had 3 final offers. So statistically not very good, but you know, that's kind of the position that we're put in as internationals. So I know it's hard, but yeah, you should be ready for this. You know, keep your head up. Yeah, and that sort of concludes it for me. Not sure if we're moving on to the Q&A now, or I'll hand the floor over to Chesney. Or
Yeah, so we're going to start the Q&A. Thank you for all of our panelists. That was awesome. I learned a ton. So now we'll open it up to questions, and then if we don't have any questions in the chat, or people just unmute yourself and ask, we do have some from the forums that we'd like to cover. Okay, so we'll start with the forums. So we got 2 questions that were almost identical, and this is one that's huge throughout all of our international peers. If you are extremely qualified for the job and you are getting discouraged by any companies just blatantly saying online in the application or the job posting that they do not sponsor international applicants, what's an alternative way to go about this and still get your experience or your foot in the door? And anyone can take these questions. All right, Sandeep, I'm making you take the question.
I think you're on mute, so that's probably why we're not hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. Operator error. So one thing is to, be able to get some clarification on what they mean by sponsorship. If it means it's a sponsorship of the H-1B, then yes, you won't have much luck with that, right? A lot of times, if you talk to the recruiters, there are guidelines what they can or cannot say. To be a fair employer, you cannot deny somebody job just based on sponsorship, right? That used to be in the manual. And so I'm telling you guys, my information is a bit dated. So please look about these things online and how to counter those questions. Now, if somebody's interested in you, they would ask you that same question in a different way. They will ask you if you need a sponsorship to work. It's sometimes hard to get. That means they're interested in you if you can work something out, right? So working something out meaning you have an OPT that you can use for 24 months. And that's why I said start your green card process early, right? And if they're saying that, we don't sponsor green cards, tell them you don't need a green card. You're going to get your own green card, right? If they can just get you the H-1B, you can start working, and then you will get your own green card. And you can, even if they want you to write it down, because you're starting there. You have 24 months. Hopefully you have started at EB2 way ahead of time, right? So if you are not from those two countries, you will get your green card before your actual OPT expires. Now, if you have an H-1B, sometimes they say, well, your H-1B is only good for 6 years. What do you do after that? If you have an approved green card, in whichever category, you can extend your H-1B beyond that 6 years with that green card approval. Though, even if your priority date is not current, even if you have not adjusted your status. That's why I was saying, start your green card process way early when you're a student. You do need an employment to finally, get the green card or submit the petition or the petition being approved. Sometimes if you don't submit a job offer with that, it could be a job offer, right? If you don't have a job offer, they will give you a conditional approval and ask you for a job offer to actually give you the final approval, which, can always happen. There is one more thing. You can, if you're looking for companies, that's something, definitely to consider. If you're going into academia or a research position, even with a company, you're sometimes not subjected to the H-1B cap, right? So for any folks who are, going to academia, studying assistant professor or even a postdoc, your H-1B is not subjected to the cap, and there is different kinds of requirements for an academic H-1B. So have a chat with your international office. Sometimes they don't know. So you have to, the burden of research is on you, not on them. There are tons of immigration forums online. You can look at Trackit is one of them. It's users like you and me. You can post a question there, and sometimes you would get some pointers. Not all of them are correct all the times, but there's some lawyers who go pro bono with students. There are a bunch in Houston. Look them up. You can ask those questions to them.
I just wanted to add on that. I just want everybody to remember, try to be flexible with your career entry. I'll give you a perfect example. Even though, I was a mechanical engineer and I thought I was going to be working on cars, and now here I am in oil and gas. So at the time, the economy was really bad whenever I entered the workforce. Same with a lot of the candidates that I got off of H-1Bs. They never thought, they have master's degrees. And the first thing we did was send them to the field for 3 years. So, and to work on either a rig or a frac crew. It's something like you have to be flexible. It's probably not ideal in which this is the degree I got, this is what I want to do. Sometimes those doors are not open at that time. I'm just saying, be flexible, get your foot in the door in other ways, not just how you perceive your entry into the work field to be. You have to be a little bit more flexible in kind of what you want to do, where you want to go. It may change. I'm telling you, in the span of 5 years, a lot of things can change. You may not end up even doing a lot of what you thought your degree was based upon. So just wanted to throw that out there a little bit.
Yeah, I love that, Veronica. There's also, for this group in particular, there's a lot of mud logging jobs available. And, that might not seem like your ideal position to start out with, but it's a fantastic way to get your foot in the door, because if you are excelling at that position, you end up working with operators, and you have an ops geo following the rig that you're on, and you're reporting to them, or engineers and drilling engineers. So even if you start out as an engineer, or you want to be an exploration geologist, it's a really great way to meet people and get to interact with them and have a way to show your work ethic to them. And this industry gets smaller and smaller, so you'll definitely end up running into them later on in your career. And it's a really nice way to showcase what you know and how you are to work with before you even have to apply for a job. When they finally have an opening, then you'll know a lot more people, and they'll already have seen how you work. And I saw also in the chat from Azam, he's Ole Miss, so I'm so happy to see you here. We were actually in grad school over there together, and I'll take this one because this is something that I'm in the middle of too. So I've been working at Callan for about 5, maybe 6 years now, if we count my internship, but I'm also doing the PhD program at University of Houston. And I was really worried about this same thing. He asks, what difficulties can international students face with a PhD degree when they're trying to join the industry and not academia? Some people say companies do not think about people with PhD degrees because they think they're overqualified. And I'll add in one other concern that a lot of companies have, is that if you seem extremely academic going into the job search, then they get a little worried that you're going to just want to get your hands on the data and publish, and that publishing and writing papers and doing those types of studies are going to be your primary focus when you get there, rather than doing work for the company and helping better the company itself. And so for that one, I think on your applications, make sure that even in like your header, your personal bio on your resume, you can add things like, don't use these words because they'll be terrible, I'm making them up on the spot, but say things like how excited or interested you are in learning about this industry, or what you want to learn more about, because your resume just inherently is going to be extremely technical when you've gone through that much schooling and written that many papers and done studies like that. And so try to give it more of a kind of personal twist and let them know how, even though you've done all of this technical work, you're really wanting to get into some of these other roles that they're offering. And you want to learn about that, and that you're invested in what the job posting is, and that that's what you're looking for. And you're looking for that type of experience, even though you do have a ton of technical skills already, that there's always something to learn. And just, if you get to the point of getting to talk to a recruiter or HR, make sure that that is at the forefront of your interview, or even just your casual elevator pitch. And because they'll already see your resume. If you're at that point, they already know that you're technical and that you're capable. And so let them feel more comfortable with how you would do in that actual role for the job posting.
Let me add something to that. Let me give you a counter view. There are companies who only hire PhD in certain positions, right? So if you're looking for an oil and gas job, Chevron Technology Company, which is a small wing inside Chevron, they only hire PhD folks, They hire, I know a couple of folks who are structural geologists, not tectonic basin modelers, none of that. They are hardcore conventional structural geologists, PhD from OU, started working there. Exxon URC only hires PhD. Dow Chemicals actually used to hire a lot of geologists, that they used to extract pure silicon from silica, right? And who other than a geologist would know what a good sand is, right? No pun intended. But so, like, Chesney, you mentioned, your resume should be customized to the job you're applying to, right? If you're applying to those, then put all your publications. You're applying to somebody like Schlumberger, they will think you are a geek if you're applying for a field engineer position with 20 publications and 200 citations. Schlumberger has a research wing that only takes PhD engineers or PhD geologists. If you're applying there, put all those in there. There is no one resume that fits all, right? So can I have a plan customized based on, because somebody is trying to know you by 3 pages of paper, which is extremely hard, right? They're going to make some guesses if you leave those blanks unfilled, right? So it's good to kind of approach it differently for each job. I see somebody raised their hand with a question. Sorry, I didn't mean to hog the discussion.
No, that was so good. And that's completely true. It just depends on where you're applying and tailor it to that. There are really technical positions, and then there are, people that have amazing backgrounds, but are trying to get into something a little different. And this was Nahid. So Nahid, go ahead and unmute. You can ask.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for organizing this. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so the question I have is, like, for OPT or STEM OPT and even for H1B, there are different timelines, like how many days can you be unemployed? So as far as I know, for OPT, you can be unemployed only for 90 days. And I think it's something similar for H1B. So my question is, like, for an industry like oil and gas specifically, where when I think about it, like, if I even get a job, then lose a job for some kind of layoff or whatever, like, I would think like it would be very hard to get a job within 90 days. So, like, my question for Sandeep would be, like, you are working in the industry for probably like 10 plus years. So did you ever fall in that kind of situation, and like how to get out of that? Like, what are the options people can try?
I've been working 16 years. Fortunately, I haven't been in those kind of situations, but I've seen plenty of people go through those. Right. So again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but get your green card as soon as you can. Right. If you are in H1B, or let me not say you, if someone is on H1B and if they lose their job, it's going to be very hard, like you said. So some of the things I have seen people do, and sometimes it worked. You can apply in other fields, right? So H1B is a specialty visa for a job that suits your degree. You don't have to be in an industry, right? So if you lose the job, well, it's going to be hard to go to USCIS and tell them that a grocery store job, fits that bill for the degree. It won't. But you can always try to go to work in a community college as an adjunct, right? So adjunct gets paid by classes. So you can go and you can ask them that, you're willing to teach a class, if it fills registration. Now, again, academic classes start at a certain time of year. If you are not near that window, that might not be an option. So what other options you have? There are some other options, like there are consulting companies that will take you in as a consultant. You can go to them, and sometimes they don't pay you. Sometimes it's going to be, if you get to working in some projects, they will pay you, but you will be on their staff role, but they won't really pay. So again, very specific situation, and we can talk one-on-one, and I can tell you a few more pointers. But there could be some options. It is a very small window to get a job in that. During boom times, the fallback method, the absolute fallback method, is to go back to your advisor and beg him to get you an RA for a little bit, just to save your visa. So that's very important, to maintain a very good relationship with your advisor, which a lot of times, including me, it didn't work out that way. Sometimes, you leave the industry or you leave academia, and whoever you left, your advisor, your manager, take it personally. And, it doesn't work out that way. So keep good connection with your network, your peers, anybody that graduated with you. Maybe he or she is an advisor somewhere, a professor somewhere, an RA. Reach out to them. You can get help from that as well. Did that answer some of the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So I think we're going to wrap this up. This was amazing, and I'm really pleasantly surprised with all of the good questions and everything. I know we're a little over time, so thanks everyone for staying around. And thank you to our panelists. That was fantastic and a ton of information. So we really appreciate your participation with this. And Daniela, if there's anything else that you've got, I'll hand it over to you.
Oh, Chesney, hold on, because I didn't want anybody to go ahead and leave because you said that. I was trying to sneak a picture for those who are willing to turn their cameras on so we can send to our sponsors and post on LinkedIn. So just before we head out, or that's going to make people like sneak out of this meeting way quick. But if anybody is willing to turn their camera on to take a picture, that would be cool. Yay, Anna's here. We got a couple of Nahid. Thank you. You guys know I'm always going to ask this at the end of meetings. See, I have the 5 people in my view. Are more people showing up and I don't see it? No, somebody just left the meeting. 2 people. Okay, maybe we'll post another picture to celebrate then.
We tried. We did our best.
So okay, that's fine.
Talking to you guys, very, very, very happy to be here. When I was a student, I got help from a lot of people, and when I went to thank them, they said, pass it forward. I don't think I've done enough of that, so very happy to share some of this knowledge. If you all have any questions, more than happy to answer. I'm not very active on LinkedIn. I probably rarely see it. I don't find it very useful. Sorry, I'm really old school. Chesney can share my email. Reach out to me one-to-one, or give me a call. We can talk about those things. Guys, I cannot stress enough what if you're a first or second year PhD student or master's student, have a plan. Have a plan on what you want to do. It doesn't always suffice to have a plan. I like something that it's an urban legend that Mike Tyson once said, that everybody has a plan and then they get punched on the face. Again, have a plan. It pays to have a plan. It pays to know what you want to do. When you're looking for employers, look for employers who have international footholds, right? So if your green card doesn't work out, if your H-1B runs out, at least they can send you outside, to recycle the time. That's what happened with me. My H-1B ran out. Somebody was kind enough to send me overseas for a year, and then I came back. So look for those employers who have international stuff. Look for, if you're looking for a research position, it's easier to get a green card through academia, right? When you're publishing papers, try to publish in good journals, because you might have published 20 papers, but only given you 100 citations. Your citations are what that counts. If you write 2 papers with 1,000 citations, that would count more than big number of papers. If you are in a poster presentation, something, do it very well so that you can get an award. Those awards count, right? If you get a Nobel Prize, your green card, gets, you don't have to do anything else. It just gets approved, right? So a lot of things they have weight. We don't think like that way. I never thought it like that way. But a lot of things you do, you don't get yourself credit for, actually means something. So do those things. And I'm happy to discuss, one or any of these in length, one-to-one. Wish you all good luck. And please have a plan.
Well, thank you so much, everybody.
Yes, thank you
All right.
guys again.
Thanks, guys.
Thank y'all.
Thanks. Bye, y'all.
Good night, everyone.